Well, hey, it's Mark Lowe. If you think I look wide-eyed in this shot, it's because we're going to talk about jumping to conclusion. It's one of the big mistakes that we make as researchers. And, over the years, it's easy to let things slip up on you, but some of these things stand out, and they can have a significant impact on your research. So this is part of the series of looking back at your research, reviewing it, and then learning from the lessons and mistakes that you've made. Often I think we learn more from mistakes than we do probably from doing it right sometimes. So let's look at some issues that we often fall into, and I think that will help you in that process of not feeling that wide-eyed, like, oh, what have I done situation, okay? One of those, and let me say this is like common. The names on the left, this is from a delinquent tax, and this is what's called a tax removal list or a release list. This is where somebody who has been marked as delinquent for taxes, but they're being taken off that list, and they have a reason why, okay, legitimate reason why. This is from the 1880s. If you're interested, if these are specific names to you, contact me. I'll let you know more. But like Ike Callis, and over there it's underage. So that meant he was not yet old enough to be charged the tax for which he's been found delinquent. Okay. William Hilliard, insolvent, and Landon Howe, he removed. He's no longer living in that district. Now, what's the misinterpretation here is I'm pointing to that little C. William C. Hilliard. That is not his initial, like stands for a name like William Claxton Hilliard. No. That means that he is a man of color. Okay? And often, folks who don't know, and that's true when we see like little DRs or little CRs in estate settlements. I've had a number of folks call me and said, oh, I didn't know my guy was a doctor. Where that meant, I said, I'm sorry, that's not what that means. It's a debit. That's the term for a debit in that record. This is a record for man of color. I've had other folks call me about looking for military records for somebody of the same name when they saw a COL. Again, that does not mean colonel in that case. That's what they were interpreting. It just meant that person was a man of color. Now, one of the biggest mistakes we make is going to tie into one of our later issues, but that's when we just don't know about an area. We just don't know enough about a given area. And that can cause problems because the way records are, the way things are handled in one area, it's not the same as it is in another area, even nearby. And so we'll cover that more, but I wanted to give you an example of one of the quick ways that knowledge of a location might help, okay? See this up close. Okay, this is two men, John B. Martin. One of them is my ancestor, okay? One of them lives on the western side of Barron County, Kentucky. The other one lives over on the eastern border of Barron County. One is born in about 1785. The other one's about 1786. So very close in age. Their wives, they have different names. They have children. They have different names. And in order often to clarify the difference as researchers, we could easily accept that the one on the left over there on the western side, that's John B. Martin. That's my guy. Well, the same name does not necessarily mean that's your guy. You've got to make sure that he's married to the right person you're looking for, and that he has the children for whom you descend from, if he is an ancestor. Okay? And even with that information being published, people today, even with good information, will choose the wrong person. And so it's important that we slow down enough to look at that. I had a cousin who was out in Texas who was coming to visit, and she said this is one of the things she wanted to work out, and we talked about it. And she told me, and I said, I hate to tell you, but that's not ours. That's the other guy. And she had been 7 years really documenting the other gentleman. And so it was a disadvantage, unfortunately, for her to live away, and records weren't quite as accessible as they are today. So that's part of the reason. But today we need not to rush to make the decision. Mull and ponder. Think about it. Do they have, you can go research more about them. If you have a doubt, or there could be more than two, but if there are multiple people of the same name, they may be related, they may not. You've got to actually look at those details, okay? And I would encourage you to figure out, even better ways to do that. And there are. Now, in fact, we always want to stay on track, get back on track. And that is what we're going to do. You want to review, you want to look at each piece of information that you have collected. And sometimes that may be over. We don't have to do it all the time. But when we're doing that, we want to make sure that we have included anything negative. And a negative finding means that, for example, if you had chosen the wrong, ended up the wrong, you didn't know, John B. Martin, that you include that information so that the next time you look at it, or somebody's looking at your information, they don't follow that same rabbit hole again. They don't go down that track. Their information's clear that you've included that. The people that aren't related to you when you research them, that's important. And I know sometimes say, well, I don't need to include that negative stuff. Sometimes we don't want to do it because it shows maybe we made a mistake. Really? We made a mistake, but we learned from it. So including that evidence is probably helpful. One of the worst things about assuming and making false choices is we don't want to damage the original. And what I mean by the original is like the case where I heard about my great-grandmother being an orphan. wrote on my brain when I heard it. And then when I looked for records, I was filtering through that piece of information. So be careful about that. Maintain your focus. So let's look at another case. And again, I think this one will show you how easily it is that somebody can be misled. This does not mean that you're not a good researcher, because you learned from making mistakes, trust me. So this is about a Godfrey Smith, and I do have an ancestor that's a Godfrey Smith. And because I knew that it's not an uncommon name. It may sound like an uncommon name, but it's not, okay? And this is a biography written about this Godfrey Smith, who was born in Pennsylvania. And so what I've done, you see the text over on the left this is a biography about that Godfrey Smith. And so I've highlighted about 4 things there. One, he was born in 1752 near Redstone, Pennsylvania. In the autumn of 1779, he enlisted in Shenandoah County, Virginia, in the regiment of Colonel Buford. Okay? Now, there's further notes down there that he has 6 sons and 3 daughters. He was married to Margaret Hoover. Okay, soon after the Revolutionary War. Okay? And he did draw a pension. So it says he was a resident of Greenup County, Kentucky. Now, this biography also tells us, I believe, that she died in 1844 and that he died in 1847. Now, that's interesting. You notice there's a big 1 up there? That's because we're going to look at another one. And so if we say that's number 1, this is a guy as a Revolutionary soldier, according to this biography, that was in Buford's company. Here is number 2. We tend to trust the fact that the people who did it did really good research. That may or may not be the case. So you tend to accept it pretty fast. But this is showing a different Godfrey Smith. You'll notice that this one, if you look over on the left, Godfrey Smith married Elizabeth Howard. Well, do you remember? Look over on the right. The Godfrey Smith from Pennsylvania married Margaret Hoover. He had 6 sons and 3 daughters. He was 1779 in the fall. He enlisted in Colonel Buford's. Well, notice that this one shows that he was also in Captain Buford's. Okay, this guy got a pension. Now, the pension for this guy was in Greenup County. Remember, he died in 1847. She died in 1844. Now, let's look at this guy. This guy died in 1820 in Kentucky. And but his wife is a different name. She died in 1847, so she outlived him. This Miss Howard, she outlived Godfrey Smith too, and she died in 1852. So, do you see there's a problem? whenever we see anything that makes us just kind of like, well, not sure about that, don't accept it. Just slow down. Go back and look at it. You might need to look at some other records. We might need to examine something else to make sure this is the right person. Are we talking about two people? Are we talking about one person? It looks like to me that we're talking about two. They've been crossed because Godfrey Smith number 2 is not the guy who enlisted in the Shenandoah Valley unit with Captain Buford and then had a pension. It's not the same guy. How do we know that? Well, if we go look at the pension, that guy's in Greenup County, Kentucky. Well, the other guy, where's the other guy? Is he also in Greenup? That might be another situation. Well, here's the deal. You may not know that very well, but that person number 1, that Godfrey Smith from Pennsylvania, was a pensioner in 1840. He was in Greenup County, and he died in Greenup County. Number 2, Godfrey Smith, was living in Warren County, Kentucky from 1810 through 1840, even longer. That's Warren County's down there in western Kentucky. He married that Betsy Howard in 1801. So he couldn't have been a pensioner married to another lady in 1840 since Betsy Howard was still living in 1852. Now, if you don't trust me at this point, don't trust me. Let's go look at other records because, if one's not clear, the second one may be clearer. Now, these are 2 records. This is Betsy Howard Smith. Remember, she's married to a Godfrey Smith. She died up in Warren County, Kentucky. Well, what happened? Well, this is the wife of the Godfrey from Warren County. He died, and she moved with her children. Now, I will tell you that often this is from one of the cemetery memorials. It is often not complete. Lots of records aren't complete, just the parts of the family that they're dealing with. This only deals with the children that moved to Illinois. Okay? They had some who stayed in Kentucky. They're not included in this memorial. You know why? They're not buried in the same cemetery. Duh. And neither is he. He's buried back in Warren County. Oh, the other one, this Godfrey Smith that was the number 1 and 2, this Godfrey Smith is not the same. That's the click, is to look at the difference and know they're not the same people. The bottom one is their 1850 census in Warren County, and that is Betsy and the children that have gone to Illinois with them. Now, both of these men were from they lived in Virginia. The one was born in Pennsylvania. The other one was born in Virginia. But they're not the same guy. They're 2 different people. Now, jumping to conclusions means Godfrey Smith is Godfrey Smith. But that's not necessarily so. And I know that because there are all kinds of Mark Lowe's. My first name is John. There's all kinds of John Mark Lowe's. They're hundreds, maybe thousands. And so it's really important that we look and that we know that we don't jump to conclusions. So this is part of the series of reviewing those mistakes, the lessons learned. And I think mistake number 1, as we said, is jumping to conclusions. Now, we're going to go through, our next session is going to be entitled A Reliance on Online Databases. Love them, want to use them. We want to use every record we have access to. That's not the point. But sometimes the database is a database. It doesn't necessarily do the thinking for us, and we have to be cautious that we don't let the database or what's been worked to help make the finding aid more useful. We don't want it to make decisions that where we actually is leading us to the wrong conclusion. So we'll be following up very soon with number 2, and then we'll deal with those locations or geographic research even more. It's been a clear, beautiful day. Spring is really close. I hope that you're enjoying the opportunity to look at records. And most of all, I hope that you'll think about the next time when you see the same name, that you'll be cautious not to jump to conclusions. If this helps you, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel and let me know specific things that you would like us to focus on. Or if you want to share a story to everybody, feel free. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. But I always believe that you learn from mistakes. And I'm not afraid to go do something as long as I learn from the mistakes that I make. And now I haven't learned from all of them. I'm going to keep working. So we'll see you a little bit later. Have a great day.